There we go.
Welcome. Hi, guys. I am so excited to be joined by two of my favorite people today. So, hi, Chris. Hi, Patrick. How are you? Give me updates. I want to hear all about life.
Hello. Oh, look at the floating heart from the Trondsen there. That's lovely. I like it. Yeah.
Chris, I've never seen someone. They usually do hearts like this, and it looks like
you could do it two ways.
Wow.
That's a really strange way to do that.
This one's, yeah.
Now I feel like you're flashing signs at us, Chris. I don't know.
Really... I am from Long Beach. That's careful.
That's weird. You're so strange. Hi, how are you? Give me updates, Chris, Patrick, life.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. I mean, we have the BDD conference coming up the end of this month. So Saturday, May 31st, you can go to the IOCDF's website. There's a list of a bunch of good conferences that the foundation is putting on this year. Obviously, we're all going to be in Chicago together, which I'm excited about. I am going to annoy Liz because it has the largest Greek population in the country, and I'm going to drag her to Greek food. On me, Liz. I'm going to find the best Greek restaurant there. We're going to have Greek food.
I want to go too.
Yeah, well, you're invited, Patrick.
Well, the rule, Patrick, is that we can't actually have a live without Chris talking about Greek food at some point.
Okay, there we go. So we just got it out of the way right away then.
Chicago, Greek. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, I'm excited about the upcoming conferences. The BDD conference has both a lived experience track and a clinical track. And then obviously the summer conference is great. I get to reunite with you guys. You know, obviously I've seen you before then, but get to reunite with you guys. And I just always think getting 2,000 people in a space that all can relate to each other is magical. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is fun. You gave me no life updates. You just gave me.
This is the cutest thing. So my nephews are one now, and we are throwing them their birthday party on Saturday.
Already one?
Wow. It's their rookie year theme. So they're in baseball. My sister's completely stressed. I'm like, they're one. They will not remember this birthday party. Just have a good time.
No idea. It's for the adults, not for the kids at one.
Yeah. And so far, they seem to be the happiest around me. I'm gonna just go with that. So I'm the official fun uncle. So that's my only title in life I have to be, and I'm good.
Good. Okay, I appreciate the fun update, Patrick. Life.
Life. Wow. I've been traveling so much. You know, it's just been amazing to be able to get back out on the road again and talk about OCD to all sorts of people and at conferences. I even recently went to a substance abuse conference to talk about OCD and substance use. So one of my passions. So it's been great. It's been so exciting to be at conferences again and just see people and connect, and I'm loving it. So that's been great. And then business wise, you know, NoCD sponsoring part of the conference, the hybrid track. So we're really excited about that, and the walks. So the inaugural walk will be in Boston in 2 weeks, and I'm
going to be there. Patrick, are you going to be there?
Tracy's coming. Actually, Tracy's going to be there.
Tracy,
I know you do.
Are you coming?
If I don't have, I'm just looking at that weekend. So if I don't have this other thing come that is potentially on the books, if it doesn't come through, then I think I will get out there. Yeah. So and maybe there's Greek food in Boston. I don't know. Maybe. How about you, Liz?
Why you're going? I want updates on the walk.
Yeah.
So Allegra Castens obviously is one of my closest friends, and she is the Grand Marshal. And so when
she is so good.
Yeah.
Yay.
So when she got asked, she was like, Chris, can you go with me? I'm like, of course. So we are flying together. So I feel really bad because she has the window seat. I have the middle seat. I feel bad for whoever's in the aisle because we're probably going to talk the whole time via talk. But I'm excited. I've never been to the walk. And obviously we have walks out here on the West Coast. We have them starting in June. But we have such a large area. So they're all like different counties. So this is going to be the first like big one. So I've never been. So I'm super, super hyped. And I hope it's a good time.
So fun.
Awesome.
Good.
How is mommy life? How is life life?
It's crazy. Life is a little crazy, but it is good. One of the twins slept 12 hours last night, so that was amazing.
Oh, wow.
So the other one did not, and he was crying a lot.
So we know who's on the bad list and the naughty list now.
Yes, exactly. But he didn't smile. And it's so cute when he smiles. So you're like, okay, like you're not sleeping, but you're smiling, so it's fine. But no, all is good. The clinic is good and busy, and life is good and busy. Lots of fun stuff coming up, and just excited to be here. Y'all know how much I love doing webinars. I only do them once a month now, and so I miss them. I crave them, And I'm just excited. I feel like there's been so much content. I've started to do this like mom chats in the evenings on my Instagram, because it's when like the kids are down and I can talk. And it's just, I just always love talking OCD. Y'all do too.
Mm-hmm.
And I love being able to both like kind of debate some stuff that's out there and what people should and shouldn't do. But I feel like the opportunity to provide education and content that the three of us and so many others know will truly change and save lives is such an honor, and something that we really are like, I'm humbled to do and also excited to do. So here we are.
Here we are. Awesome.
All right, so let's hop in. Just couple quick reminders and housekeeping. You guys know how these work, but these webinars are intended to be educational, not replace treatment or provide individual treatment. And of course, IOCDF and or our webinars are not a crisis or suicide hotline. So if you're feeling unsafe or suicidal, please call 911-988 or contact your local emergency services. It's critical that you stay safe, and we want to help make sure that that happens as well. Today, we are going to be talking all things OCD. And I don't know if we want to kind of agenda set of like, what are the things we want to make sure we get to and cover today? So Chris, why don't you go first?
One thing I want to say real quick. So I forgot when you were asking me an update. So at OCD Southern California, we put on a conference on Saturday, this recent Saturday, in Orange County. We had 175 people register. We had about 150 of those show up.
Nice.
But I think one of the most powerful things, we had a bunch of breakout talks, but the last talk we do is we have everybody that spoke go on a panel and we get questions. And what I loved hearing, obviously, is people loved being together, the community. And it was cool to see, like you were saying, there's 12 different clinicians perspective. And so it was awesome. One thing I was surprised, though, is one of the biggest things that came up is AI. And I don't know if you guys are getting this, but, there was this kind of, I wouldn't say debate, but there was somebody asking the question. And so some of the people in the attendees were like, hey, I think it's great. It gives me support through, between sessions. But I heard from a lot of people that it's now just become a new tool to get reassurance, and that they are constantly asking for reassurance, especially those with scrupulosity, especially those with health related, contamination related. So I know, we don't have to go into a whole big discussion, but I think as technology advances, there's always, for us at OCD, with OCD, there's always an opportunity for us to take it and to feed the OCD. And I think that's just a caution out there, is that, you're going to see articles coming out that, hey, AI is helping things, right? But we always have to look at that kind of information with a different lens. I know with my health OCD, I would have been up till 5 a.m. going on AI, ChatGPT. What is this symptom? Does this mean that? So just a caution out there. There was a lot of people admitting that they were using it for different sources of reassurance, and we know that feeds the disorder.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting because so many times we hear, like, with the advances of technology, people saying things too, like, are y'all afraid it's going to work you out of a job, or it's going to do this? And I'm like, first of all, we all want to be worked out of a job. Like, we would love patients to not need any of us, right? Like, to not need OCDI, to not need an OCD, to not need any of us because they're managing and doing great. Like, that's our end goal, or we're all doing this all wrong. However, actually, it's kind of, I think, like, ChatGPT and a lot of these new technological advances can really help patients get to treatment sooner. I look at it as like, man, this can be a tool that somebody can actually say, like, I have OCD, what treatment should I do? And it can point them to the better evidence-based treatment really quickly, which is amazing. However, as we all know, like, if untreated OCD is not going to be treated by figuring something out. Like, right. You cannot solve your way out of OCD. You actually solve your way into OCD. And so instead, the more you use these tools to try to feel better and have these quick fixes, the more it just becomes a new ritual.
Kids, I'm old enough to remember when the internet came.
You'll have to wait for my old story in a second too, Patrick.
Boy, we were all worried about people going and doing this Google thing where they Dr. Google themselves. Yeah. And, this is the next iteration of it. And in the next 10 years, there'll be a new technology that will be here that we don't even have a clue of what it is right now, but something will come up, and then we'll be worried about that one. So anytime something new comes out, there's always a pro and a con on it, right? And we have to recognize that. I will say one of the nice pieces for therapists with using AI and the technology that it has is it can definitely help with things like dictating notes. I even go to my dentist now, and my dentist just dictates notes, and it writes. He's got the microphone. He's in my mouth. He's like, tooth 32, blah, 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 and it's appearing on the screen. So I think that one of the nice things from my end on this is as this technology improves, I'm going to be able to spend more time in the session with the people I'm working with instead of typing while I'm, and trying to get it. Well, hold on a second. I got to type that. Now I got something that's generating this note for me that can really be helpful. And I'm really excited about that piece of it.
100%. No, I can't think about it, like talk enough about it. So I am working on a mental health training app with a good friend of mine, and that's going to focus on like all mental health disorders, not like primarily OCD or anxiety, and really about like how can we help curate leading experts to bring this great content. And you guys, the other day I was doing my Instagram story and trying to like put a story, and I was with them, and they made me feel so old, but I was like, I cannot tag anybody. This is not working. And they were like, what are you doing? And they kept saying, are you trying to put it as a story or on your grid? And I was like, what the heck is a grid?
What's a grid? I don't know what a grid is.
About. And they were like, a grid, like calm down. It's called an Instagram grid. Like, do you want this on your grid where it lives forever in your profile, or do you want this on a story? And I was like, well, I didn't know it was a grid. And you guys are confusing me. And now I feel really old and I don't like it. It's hilarious. And then I was like, I guess I want it on my grid. And I guess that's why I couldn't tag you. And it was this like Chris and Allegra would kill me because they'd be like, oh my God, Liz, like you're so old and you need to get with it. But I truly had no idea.
Hey,
so anyway, we learned, right?
We learned. Just for a fun comparison here. I went to college with a word processor because we didn't have laptops when I went to college.
Is it bad? What's a word processor? wait, is it a typewriter or is there something?
It's a typewriter that you could put a disk into and it could save what you typed, basically. But that's all it could do was, so it was basically like Word Perfect or Word, just that's it though. It wouldn't do anything else. It didn't have a screen to do. It had a screen like this big that you could see like 12 lines maybe of text, and you could save it on a disk, and it literally had a flywheel and it had a ribbon, and it would type it all out after you hit type. But yes, there were no laptops until I went to grad school.
See what I mean? It's we all learn, and guess what? You made it, and I'm gonna venture to say you have a lot more knowledge than other folks, but that's the whole part, right? That I'm like, oh, you use ChatGPT for everything. You don't understand this, but that's okay. Anyway, my point is that I think the technological advancements really create so many opportunities for us to enhance clinical care. And I find it to be really exciting, and really like Patrick NoCD was on the forefront of that, right? Of really
totally.
How can y'all take a technology that already exists, right? Computers, teletherapy, these kind of
apps,
video conferencing and apps, and put it into a place that can increase accessibility, right? Which at the end of the day, I hope that's our goal. I don't think any of us that are clinicians are putting time into something that we don't feel like is going to make change that we're super passionate about.
Well, think about all the conferences for years talked about dissemination. It was a theme for years in a row at every conference. How do we disseminate? How do we disseminate?
Yep.
Well, now with technology, we're disseminating. And I'm so excited, like you said, to be on the forefront of that with what we're doing at NoCD, because I think we're probably the largest disseminator of ERP at this point in time in the world. And it's an honor for me to have figured out a way to help solve that problem of dissemination, to get the right evidence-based treatment to people who need it. And as many of you know, but for those of you newer to this who don't know, and you used to have to drive to a large city to find your ERP specialist because there weren't rural ERP specialists, if few and far between, if there were. And without the technology, you had to go and actually see them. Just a little interesting thing for all of you too. My first use of teletherapy was in 1999, actually, but it was a camera system in a room at St. Louis Behavioral Medicine Institute hooked to another camera in a town called Potosi, 2 hours away. And they had to lay an actual line between the hospital and the clinic. The whole system cost $250,000 to set up. And now just think of it. Now you just pick up your phone and you hit, oh yes, I have a therapy session.
Oh my God. Well, if I tell y'all like OCD Challenge, which was an early self-help tool
Right,
that we
right.
created for peace of mind, and peace of mind. If I tell you the amount we spent to build OCD
I
challenge, we would all like have a heart attack. Where
can't
now I
even
look at
imagine.
it and I'm
Yeah.
like, I hope nobody uses this anymore. I need so much help. And that's a goal. One day we'll get there through IOCDF, but it's like, man, you look at some of the stuff that we tried early on and it was not where it should be. And now there's so much that is, which is it's just so great, right? It really, I think in the past, there was this huge stop point, right? Of, hey, we know if you have OCD, you need to be doing ERP, you need to get evidence-based treatment. And then people would say, how can we do that? My mom actually talks about how when she was on the board of IOCDF, this was decades ago, they were doing this retreat and they all wrote down like, what is their 5 and 10-year vision and goals for the foundation? And my mom wrote that there is a OCD provider accessible within 50 miles of anywhere in the US.
Wow, that's great.
And she was really upset because everybody laughed and everybody was like, that's just not feasible. Like that, like, Linda, that's not going to happen. Like, yes, that'd be great. But like that, like it was felt so out of reach.
Right.
And then you look at organizations now that actually that is possible. You're like, yeah,
100%.
because of technology, we can do it. So there's a lot of benefits, but I know people have a lot of questions. So we're going to hop in. I will tell y'all my current soapbox, because I can't like not share something I'm passionate about right now, is the quick fix situation we have going on in America of like microbiome and all the things, which by the way, like I'm sure if my microbiome was better balanced, I'd feel better, but it doesn't fix OCD. And I just want to like get back on my soapbox reminder of evidence-based interventions and just encouraging us all to remember and to be promoting evidence-based interventions first. So if someone is struggling with OCD, ERP is where we start. It is the gold standard, most evidence-based intervention for treating OCD. If you're dealing with an anxiety disorder, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? But there is an evidence-based intervention for all mental health disorders. And we really want to start there. Be really cautious going down the gimmicks, the quick fixes, the things that are being sold to you, pushed to you, the celery juice, all the stuff online, instead of what we know works and what research has backed and validated. This is not something that like Dr. McGrath, Chris, myself just like to pitch and promote because it's what we do. These are things that are backed in decades of research and decades of science, and it's what we know is the most successful intervention.
Yeah. And the day celery juice is better than ERP, I'll switch to celery.
I'm happy to promote it and talk about it. Yes. There's we don't have any money for promoting ERP.
No,
I want to be very clear about that. For us, it's like, I'm happy to promote whatever we know works. And I think sometimes people think that, oh, well, you were trained that way, so you're always going to stick with that. No, I am always wanting to learn. And by the way, all of us I know have taken trainings on different interventions, different approaches, and have been wanting to learn. And the second the evidence tells us one thing outweighs the other, or one thing is comparable to the other, we're happy to start talking about it. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Liz. So at the event, Dr. Stephanie Davis and myself were doing a CE talk for clinicians. And that's what we really talked about is like, we were trained in one way, but we don't still do what we were trained. We were, trained to drop a client's cookie on the ground, rub it with their shoe and lick it, and then ask them their SUD scale and try to get it down. And we were talking about the different ways that we practice, but that's what we both said is like, this isn't our treatment. I wasn't even born when the treatment was created, but I'd love to get credit, right? And I think there's this weird backlash anytime we push evidence-based care, because it might not be the treatment that it sounds scary, or it might not be the treatment a therapist likes to do or whatever, but this isn't something that the three of us invented. We don't get 15 cents every time somebody says the word. For me and my master's of science, like we spent a year on our thesis. We spent a year in research. Like they really wanted us to understand why evidence-based care is out there. Now, they didn't focus on OCD, but they were talking about all the different modalities that have popped up, and it's supposed to heal your trauma and heal your family and heal this. And it has no backing behind it. And people spend thousands of dollars, waste hope, and so many years in non-evidence-based care. And so I know sometimes the treatment can sound hard, but I think that was a good conversation that came out of the event is you can be doing ERP in a way that is aligned with who you are as a person. And the point of treatment is to understand new things, to grow, and to start to gain confidence that you can regain things in your life. So I love that you're talking about this, because I think if we don't push evidence-based care, treatment gets watered down and more people are damaged and harmed.
Amen.
My little soapbox might be, and with the two of you with lived experience here, it's interesting. I was doing even just recently a couple of talks, and inevitably recently the question comes up, you didn't mention the trauma someone had for their OCD to develop. And I would like to just put out there very just straightforward. You don't have to have a traumatic experience to develop OCD. Right? Oh. It's not everything that we do is based in a trauma that happens, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people are reaching out for a reason that their OCD started. I think some people will say trauma, I think other things. And I always remind people there are people out there with OCD that haven't had that experience, right? Mm-hmm. Now, does that mean that, trauma might have exacerbated it, or does it make it more difficult because you're balancing both? But I think a lot of times, and I don't know if you feel this way, Patrick, but it's usually from the parents. And I think a lot of times it's because they have this like grief, and they had their child or their loved one suffer for so long, and they want an answer. And I think sometimes trying to search for that, is it trauma, or is it the way I raised my child, or something like that? It can be kind of dangerous, because now the person is going on this journey of what caused my OCD, yet they're not treating it. And there may not be an answer. We know there's a lot of genetics behind it, a lot of hereditary components, but we have no good evidence that says that, hey, a trauma has to happen primarily, and then OCD is formulated. That wasn't my experience. I was showing OCD when I was a little kid, way before any kind of thing happened.
Totally. Exactly. And my last thing is just be cautious of not going with kind of, I don't want to say going with grain, because I don't want people to think oh, you're supposed to go with the masses, but for every disorder, right? There is an organization, some sort of body, hopefully a nonprofit organization that you can trust, that truly will validate and produce effective and understanding about treatment. So IOCDF, for example, you can go to IOCDF.org and you can find the current up-to-date treatment recommendations, which, by the way, I didn't write, Chris didn't write, Patrick didn't write alone. The Scientific Advisory Board wrote this. So this is backed by an entire group of individuals who are well-known leaders, experts, and researchers and clinicians in the field, who are reading it, not just writing it on their own, but actually backing it with research and evidence to say, this is the current recommendation. Mm-hmm. And that exists for almost all disorders, right? You can go to the American Psychological Association. You can go to different websites to figure out what is the current evidence-based intervention. The good news is, once you figure that out, then you say, okay, now I need to find a provider who specializes in that evidence-based intervention. And that is not because they put it on their Psychology Today profile that they treat it. That is not how you figure out if someone is a specialist in it, which I know is confusing, since it's what most people do.
Because they're also specialists in 97 other things too.
They happen to specialize in 45 other disorders, which is not possible. Red flag. If I
is your cat sad? They both treat OCD and they give therapy to your cat. It's
wild. Right. But so there's this process of then you want to figure out where and or who did they receive their training from, right? Did they, if someone says they do ERP, I want to know, where'd you get trained? Did you take a BTTI at IOCDF? Did you have consultation with somebody who's a known clinician or researcher in the field? Did you train at a center with somebody else and under someone else? I mean, most of us, Patrick and Chris can talk about, most of us were trained by the same people. It may be a degree or two removed, but the OCD world is actually still quite small, right? Most of us have training with the same person or somebody who was trained under that same person, and those connections. And that's what you want to know is, was there specialty training? Was there consultation? And then, of course, you need to kind of interview them. Just because someone says they treat OCD doesn't mean they're going to be a fit for you. Sometimes two
100%.
people training and one person's a fit and one person isn't, because the personality style, right? The way they do their interventions, the language they use can work for you or might not. So there's a lot that goes into it, but the good news is that treatment works. If you're with the right provider and getting the right treatment, it can change your life. And we don't just say that because, we think that. We say that because we've seen that, we know that, and we have so many patients who are evidence of that. Yeah. First question from Ruby at 11:10. I'm not evolving in life due to OCD and intrusive thoughts, plus on top of it. Dr. McGrath, why don't you start with just giving some feedback on where Ruby can start and what she should do to get to a place of freedom?
11:10. I'm just scrolling there. Here's the thing. OCD doesn't want you to evolve. OCD wants you to stay stuck. And if you're not evolving, I might translate that into, it means that you're continuing to do compulsions, right? Many people will say the intrusive thoughts are getting in the way of life. I always give an example, though, that after treating OCD for so long, I've absorbed every single intrusive thought of anybody I've ever treated. So if Liz and Chris and I are on a staircase together, I'm going to think about throwing the two of them down the stairs, because I've treated so many people who are afraid of, what if I throw somebody down the stairs? That thought will not stop me from chatting with them as we walk down the stairs. It will not stop me from taking the stairs with them whatsoever. So I think it's sometimes easy for people to think I can't live life or do things I want if I'm experiencing these thoughts, images, or urges. And I say that is incorrect. You absolutely can. The thing that's getting in the way of your life is the compulsions that you're doing as an attempt to neutralize those things. And the whole goal of this is to learn that you can handle whatever pops into your head. That's where I would start.
Yeah. And what I would say, there's a lot of discussion about this on Saturday. There's a lot of talks that are going to happen at the conference this July. Is we do have co-occurring disorders. I mean, I always rarely, find somebody that only has OCD, and, right. And it's funny. So I'll find myself being like, wow, they're lucky. And I'm like, wait, they have OCD. They're not, they're not lucky. But what I'd say, Ruby, is where you always want to start is make sure you get a good diagnosis. It sounds like you do. You have both OCD and ADHD. And it's important to see how they both interact. I know for me as a clinician, when someone's experiencing a co-occurring condition, I want to make sure that that's being treated as well. So for ADHD, are you on the proper medication? We have stimulants, we have non-stimulants as well. That's going to help with the ADHD. How is it impacting you? Do you find that it impacts the OCD? Does it not really impact the OCD? Sometimes sessions need to be slightly different. I know if I'm doing an IOP, especially, and I'm with a client for 3 hours and they have ADHD, we're going to take a little bit more breaks. I'm going to have them be more engaging in the conversation. Sometimes we're going to walk around the office and talk because they need to get some movement. So I think a big thing is just recognizing like how these interplay and working with a team that can help with it. But I know all of us have felt that way, and we feel behind and we feel lost, and often we see our peers accelerating at a different pace. What I always remind people is, you're on your own journey. My favorite quote is chase the dream, not the competition. So if we're kind of looking at what everybody else does, it brings us down and it kind of adds a depressive element. But you're here, you're watching this live stream. You have two of the most incredible clinicians, and me. I'm just here just for looks, yes, or jazz hands or something to make it entertaining. But in all seriousness, I always say this. This is kind of my mom's and I's thing. When people are always like, I feel lost and it's down, I'm like, but you came to something like this. That means that you have some hope, and I hope you hear something today that gives you some direction and some hope.
I couldn't agree more. And just a reminder that when we are treating two disorders, we need to have somebody who specializes in both. So if you don't have someone who specializes in ADD/ADHD and OCD, it's okay to have two providers, but make sure your team is talking, right? You cannot be getting great treatment if you're going to two different people and they might be saying conflicting things. We want them talking and collaborating, and we want to be thoughtful about what is the approach going to be so that you're getting relief from both things, right? And that we're being thoughtful of that.
100%. That collaboration is key. Yeah.
It's so key. Next question is from Amy at 1108. Chris, I'm going to throw it to you. Is IOCDF still publishing their newsletter that used to come out quarterly?
Yeah, so I get them in person. So I think, Amy, we can request them to be physically there. The reason I have them send it to us is I like to have them on the in our waiting room, right on the table. I'm always promoting the IOCDF. If everybody doesn't know, I always tell you guys, IOCDF is the only reason I'm here. I was able to find evidence-based care through them after really bad care for 1.5 years. So I could definitely relate to the earlier conversation. But I always have those newsletters out so people can read it while waiting and really learn what there is out there. We also get a stack sent to us so we can bring them to OCD SoCal events, and I get one that gets mailed directly to me so I can read it at home. But there is a digital version of that, and if you are signed up, you should be getting a code. I think I saw later on where Amy said that she only got one. I know that there's been more than that. I always have to write the OCD SoCal update, so I know there's more because I'm always like, So I think they come out quarterly, so you should get about 4 a year at this point. You should have gotten one, and I think the second one is coming any moment because I know I had to submit something for that. I just want to shout out the newsletter real quick. Super Memories. I mean, that was something that my mom would constantly bring, and we'd read through the newsletter. And there was one article that always sits with me. And I know she's not around anymore because when I was getting treatment, she wrote in the article, I think she was in her 80s, But the whole article is about it not being too late to get help. And she said, for 80 years, didn't get help, didn't get therapy, but she finally got in her 80s and it changed her life. And so it always stuck with me because we always feel behind and we always feel like I missed out on so much, but she had such a positive outlook. So some of the stories in there are incredible. So I encourage people to sign up. It's free.
Absolutely. And there's actually a link in the comment section that IOCDF has already posted where you can sign up for that newsletter. Yeah, so you can get it virtually and then you can get it virtually, right? Get it electronically. You can sign up to have it emailed to you. Next question at 11:08 is from Amy. Health OCD. How do I continue to enjoy life when health OCD is so strong? Patrick, I'll throw it to you.
Well, geez, I almost think throwing it to Chris, just because of your own health anxiety. Chris, you figured out a way to live life with health anxiety.
Yeah, no, I can take this. I mean, health, what I feel, this is just my personal experience with it. One thing that was challenging, I don't think any subtype is worse or better. I think they have unique challenges. And one unique challenge with health OCD is at any age, right? There's going to be days that you exercise and overexert yourself and you wake up with pains the next day, or you get a migraine, or, your throat is dry, or you get an illness, right? And so for me, all of those things, those small, sensations, it always blew up to this has to be a form of cancer. This has to be something that's been unrecognized by the medical field. And I'm the first one, right? I'm going to be patient 0. All the different hepatitis A, B, C's through D's, Z's. I don't even know if there are, but I used to think I got them. I will say the first thing is what I always talk to clients about and what helped me is how am I contributing to the problem? And I started to realize maybe going to multiple doctor's appointments, maybe asking my mom constantly, because she works at a hospital as a dietitian, calling for reassurance, Googling, researching. This is so embarrassing, but I actually reached out to the CDC because a house near my house was being tenanted for termites. And I was worried, should we keep the windows down because the wind would blow that direction? So I'd start there. Amy, how are we contributing? I think we don't realize or recognize that kind of our thought patterns, our behaviors, et cetera, are help growing. But I think the biggest thing that I started recognizing is a small pain is not cancer. I stopped jumping at every single thing that popped up. I think the other thing is what, Patrick was explaining earlier. If he had thoughts about pushing Liz and I down the stairs, he would still walk with us. He'd still go through that journey to teach himself that despite having thoughts and anxiety, he can still function and he can still make decisions and he can trust himself enough to be in that walkway with us. And I think for me, it was really just I have to stop thinking that at every moment I'm going to die and I have to start continuing to live my life. In the beginning, it will feel like turbulence on a plane, but you hit that stride. And then one day I was like, oh, I've had 3 or 4 sensations this week, but I've given it nothing and it seems to get quieter. So there's definitely treatment for that. ERP helps with all subtypes, and it was super advantageous for me to get this under bay.
And may I also?
Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say real quick. I will also say I've gotten this question about every single subtype of OCD.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm going to go on my quick little analogy I'm telling everybody about, but y'all can steal it. I'm going to give you permission to use it because I actually stole it from someone else. So number 1, we have to think about what we're doing to fear and anxiety, right? Are we making it bigger or are we making it smaller? And what I want us to really think about is that oftentimes the things we think we're doing to make it smaller are actually feeding it, right? It's making it bigger. We're trying to get rid of it. We're trying to suppress it. We're trying to do a safety behavior or ritual so that we can quickly feel better. But that's actually sending the message to our brain that this is dangerous. This is scary. We need to do something about it. And so we constantly have to remind ourselves, are we sending the message to our brain that I'm not afraid of you, I'm not scared of you? Or are we sending the message of I'm terrified, please don't do this to me or throw me this thought? And so I call it the bring it on attitude that I talk about here at the clinic all the time is, are you approaching OCD with this bring it on attitude that okay, health anxiety, bring it on. What are you going to throw at me today? What are you going to have? Do we have this come on, I'm ready for you, I'm not afraid of you approach? Or do we walk into the day saying, okay, I am going to commit to going to school today and, going to see my friends, but I just hope I don't have these thoughts, or I hope I don't get triggered by this thing. If we have that approach and thought process, we are guaranteeing we're going to have triggers and we're going to have intrusive thoughts. Why? Because we're also scanning for them. right? We're also saying, I hope they don't happen, which means we're on the lookout trying to make sure they're not there, versus the bring it on attitude is like, we expect them to be there. We know they're probably going to be there. We kind of invite them to, we don't care. So when they're there, we're not responding to them. We're not triggered by them. So there was this great analogy that I saw on Instagram. It got pushed to me where this dad watched his daughter get broken up with in the driveway. And he sent her this nice long note about how, like, you know, someone else will come along and there will be this thing. But anyways, he went into this thing of, I want to tell you a story, but I want you to learn to be the bull in life. And he gave this beautiful analogy about how when there are rainstorms, cows run away from the rain. And because they run away from the rain and the storm because they're scared, they end up being stuck in it so much longer because they don't know where they're running and they don't know like how to get away from it. And it ends up kind of chasing them and following them. And they end up stuck in the storm for this prolonged period of time because they keep trying to get away from it, but they actually unintentionally end up running into it more and more. Where bulls actually run head on into thunderstorms. And that while when they do this, it sucks and it's really hard and scary, they actually like are not afraid of thunderstorms and they run straight into it and they move through it so much quicker, right? Like they run right into it and it passes and they're done with the thunderstorm. It's gone, versus that cow is still over there stuck in it as they're trying to run away from it and it's chasing them and they're right. And so are you being the bull or the cow, right? Are you doing things that like, I don't want to feel pain right now, so I'm running away from it, but you end up stuck so much longer. I mean, how many of y'all listening have said to yourself, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done these rituals because I feel worse now than I did before I did them, right? We hear that all the time because we're trying to have temporary relief, but then we're actually causing longer term damage and pain and suffering. Versus are we willing to, yes, feel uncomfortable, be anxious, right? Live life despite having these health scares and know that if we do that and we push and we face it and we run straight into it, it actually will end up with freedom so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
I sometimes show the last 5 minutes of the second It movie in therapy when all the adults are being decimated by it. And then Mike says, there's another way to make someone small, and that's not believing in him. And it goes to hit Mike, and it can't hit Mike because Mike has stopped believing in it. Mm-hmm. Right? Your best shield against this is, like you said, Liz, I couldn't agree more. I love that. You got to go toward it, right? And when you hope you don't think of OCD, all you think of is OCD. Yeah. And when you decide, hey, OCD, I see you, I hear you, I just don't believe you. Yep. You can crush it now, right? We're so suggestible. When I do talks, I talk about lice. And I just talk about, lice, they live in your hair. Yeah, I know. See, look, she's already touched her head.
My hair already is.
So much lice at my kid's school this year. And every time I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want lice in my house. Okay, sorry.
But I love it. I just watch the audience start to do this. And I say, look how suggestible all of you are. I said the word lice and I described them a little bit. And you all started feeling something. Now you know what OCD can be like and how powerful it can be. If I could just say the word lice and you feel that way, imagine if there's something in the back of your head just constantly doing this to you, how you will feel all day long. So, yeah.
What I just want to add really quick, because you talked about triggers, right? And to lean in. A lot of times what I remind people is that, there was a really good post. I wish I could take credit for it, but there's a funny account. I think it's called Intrusive OCD Memes or OCD Intrusive Memes. But they're a person living with OCD and they put out a powerful post. And they really said, what I love about ERP is all the things that triggered me originally actually now turned out to be some of my favorite hobbies and my favorite things. And I always think about it, right? So if we're dealing with POCD and your niece is triggering you, we can talk about a trigger being this big, bad, scary thing, but it's this really cute 8-month-old that you haven't held, right? Or somebody who's triggered by driving with hit and run OCD can overcome that and be able to drive along the coast and enjoy themselves. So I think it's just a reminder that these triggers are typically things you really like and enjoy. Not always. Lice, asbestos, right? Nobody loves those things. But most of the times it's like when I look at the things that I was avoiding, those are the things that I choose to do on my free time now. That's important to remember.
Yeah. Next question to hop into at 11:15 from Zuhair, and Patrick, I'll throw this to you, but is ICBT therapy better than ERP?
Well, going back to our discussion earlier about evidence-based treatments, it hasn't met the level of evidence-based treatment that ERP has. So we stick with the guidelines, and so I stick with ERP. I welcome any other therapy to do the level of research required to get to the same level of evidence-based that ERP has, and when it does, then I will start learning that therapy and practicing that as well.
And I'm happy to be more direct. No. Sorry. So I know you guys are like, but I feel like patients need to hear that. And maybe I can change it from no to not yet, right? That like, as of today, ICBT is not yet better than ERP in the sense that we don't have any reason to believe it's better than ERP yet, and that it should become the primary intervention. So it doesn't mean ICBT doesn't help people, doesn't mean it doesn't have really useful qualities. But as of right now, ERP should be what you do first. Again, with the right person, with someone who truly specializes in it. And we did a whole webinar on this, Chris, with John Abramowitz. I loved that webinar where we talked about, I think it's called ERP 101, maybe, Chris, I can't remember, but where we really talked about like what actually is ERP, because I think there's a ton of misconceptions of what ERP actually is, what it actually looks like. And I talked about how for the first like 10 years of my life and my own ERP treatment, I would have been sitting here saying ERP doesn't work for me. But it was actually because I wasn't doing ERP correctly. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I was doing ERP, but still engaging in safety behaviors, right? And so like, I was not really doing ERP. I was doing ERP and still holding on or whatever it might be. And y'all know I talk a lot about this, but I was using ERP to function instead of ERP to get freedom. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that I used ERP for all of my triggers as I had them to be able to make it to school, to do my homework, to attend internship, but I wasn't actually using ERP to address my core fears and get freedom. And so I stayed stuck, and it felt like this is like this life sentence of I have to do this forever. ERP is so daunting. I always have to have my guard up. I always have to do treatment. And I think when you think about ERP like that, you're like, that sounds terrible. Why would I want to do that? And so it's so important to understand that ERP can get you to freedom, and maybe you need to adjust the way you do ERP versus also throwing ERP out and saying it doesn't work. But ERP has one of the highest success rates of any mental health intervention. And so I absolutely make sure we really are promoting and talking about that, because I think a lot of times we hear it's not working, and I want to know, why isn't ERP working before we throw ERP away?
Yeah, what I just want to add too is sometimes people use old stats like, oh, ERP only works for 50% of people. A lot of those studies are a lot older. People are much better trained in ERP now, and it's a lot easier to find a well-trained provider in the modality.
Yeah, I've watched it evolve over 25 years of even doing ERP. The year one of my postdoc, we were still teaching diaphragmatic breathing and muscle relaxation and coping tapes and everything. And then a bunch of more research came out for ERP and said, don't do that. And so we were like, okay, well, we stopped. Within 2 weeks, we eliminated all of that. And so I've seen the evolution of ERP. And like you said earlier, Chris.
And think about the evolution of habituation to inhibitory learning and the way we've all learned from that. You know, when I worked at res programs early on, we always were focused on what are your SUDs? Have your SUDs dropped by 50%? Have you seen a reduction? Just sit there and habituate. We're like, we don't even ask SUDs anymore here at OCDI. We ask, what'd you learn? Because we care way more about, like, during that ERP process, what did you learn than did your SUDs drop? Well, why? People might say SUDs, by the way, is like anxiety level, subjective units of distress scale, a little acronym we often use, but like 0 to 10 or 0 to 100, how anxious do you feel? But why a lot of people who come from other programs to ours will say, why do you not ask that? And our answer is because we are not putting the emphasis on your anxiety level. And if we're trying to tell you anxiety isn't dangerous, anxiety is not something you should respond to, but we're constantly asking, what's your anxiety level? Did your anxiety drop? Has your anxiety decreased? Do you feel better? What are we putting the emphasis on? How you feel, your anxiety. And so we have changed that totally, right? And so ERP has evolved tremendously from when I was a patient back when I was 15 to now when I run a program serving similar patients, right, with similar presentations. Very different, and it should evolve. I would be very skeptical if you're getting treated by someone who's like, I'm an ERP specialist and I haven't changed the way I do approaches in 20 years. It's like, that's a little scary. All right, next question from Lee. Chris, I'll throw this to you. Can OCD give you nightmares and delusions?
I'm always better when I can visually see the question. What time was it at?
It was at 11:18. Can OCD give you nightmares and delusions?
Oh, I see it. Okay, thank you. I'll start with the first one. So often one of the things, I am trained in CBTI, which stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia. And there was a lot of really good information. And one of the things that people don't realize is the purpose of sleep. And one of the things that happens during the night is we really start to consolidate memories. It really kind of takes the day and kind of makes sense what's mattered, what doesn't. So if all day we're sitting there and we're ruminating and spinning on the fact that we might kill someone, we can often have those dreams. A lot of clients have said like their greatest fears happen in their dreams. They wake up in a pool of blood, or they wake up and they hit somebody with a car, right? So yes, absolutely, it can influence your dreams. What I always remind clients is it's just another trigger, right? People wake up and they had a nightmare about their greatest fear happening and then treat it like the worst thing in the world. And I'm like, okay, it's just a trigger, right? You're not feeling great. You're having these thoughts. How are you responding to that? Well, I got to figure out, did it happen? You're doing compulsions. It's not going to get you any clarity. It's going to create other confusions. Now, the second part of the question is a little bit more nuanced. So when you're saying delusions, technically, no. I mean, we can't have delusions with OCD. The reason I say technically no is because I know a lot of times with my own OCD, now I can look back and be like, how did I not see? How did I think that, right? Like an example I always give is I remember I was driving by a billboard for Coors Light, which, by the way, is probably the crummiest beer. So that should have been the trigger. But I was so in my head that I thought, what if that billboard got me drunk? And I parked and I slept for 8 hours because that's what I felt I need to do in my car to sober up, right? So we can have things that kind of are really not based in reality when we have OCD. But if we're having auditory and visual hallucinations, delusions, we're having, things like that, I would say to look into just talk to your clinician, because I think people get this really confused. I'll have clients all the time worry that they have schizophrenia or something else because they're like, I thought, I did something and, I thought I hit somebody with my car and then I woke up and my car wasn't dented and now I'm questioning my sanity. So OCD can be, pretty intense. We can have low insight at times, but if you're having delusions and hallucinations, it could be a co-occurring condition. It's hard to diagnose over this. So I'd say just find somebody who could specialize and do an assessment.
Yeah. So the biggest thing to remember is that oftentimes if you think you're having delusions and you're like, you have awareness that I'm worried this is a delusion and I'm panicked and can I talk to you about it? That often would fit more in OCD realm versus when individuals are having delusions, they don't have insight to recognize it's a delusion. We do. They may sometimes have some of that insight too, right? So we can, that can happen, but OCD can definitely be super bizarre. And I can have patients walking down the hall being like, my arm just touched the wall. What if I did get a lead paint on my arm? And we're like, we were 10 feet from the wall. Like, you didn't do that. That's not a delusion. That's definitely an OCD intrusive thought, but it can feel like a delusion in the sense that like, but you didn't actually touch the wall, right? And they're like, well, yes, but what if, right? So it's that more of what if versus no, I actually believe it, right? Most people with OCD, we have OCD with insight, even if it can become lower insight. You do typically know that like, I know this is irrational. I know this doesn't make sense, but I feel like I have to do it. Versus if you're dealing with psychosis, there's a lot less insight, right? You're actually doubling down on those things being true and those things being real versus having an understanding that they're not. But Dr. McGrath, I'm going to let you add in.
Just one interesting thing. So if we look at the OCD related conditions like hoarding has very low insight levels. That's quite standard in that.
BDD as well.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, and BDD too. So not uncommon to see that low insight in the OCD related conditions for sure. When someone with hoarding says, "Oh, my house, I just need like 3 hours and a few suitcases, and I'll have it all straightened up," and there's a TV crew waiting for and they'll need 3 weeks to get into this house. Yeah, so remember. A lot of these are perception issues, right? Versus reality issues. Yeah.
I just want to clear up real quick. I wasn't laughing at hoarders. My mom's dad was a hoarder, my grandfather. And I remember one time he was like, wouldn't get rid of his like 1960s or 1970s encyclopedias. And he's like, well, what if, my grandkids need to do a paper and they have to, I have them ready. And I was like, we have Google, we don't use encyclopedias. So it is he just had very low insight about the reality of his situation. I mean, he couldn't use 90% of his home. I love him.
I will tell you though, Chris, I would love an old encyclopedia if you still have those, because I do think I like some of that stuff.
You just made Chris's grandpa's hoarding even worse. Oh, no.
Great.
But I was in someone's office the other day and I was like, where did you find that calculator? Because it's like, got to be from like the, 1980s. And she was like, I don't know. I found it here. I was like, it's so retro. Can I have that? I love it. So I apologize, but all that's coming back. I'll know how it goes. Okay. We have a million questions in 10 minutes. So let's kind of do rapid fire. One of us will answer and we'll keep going. I'll start. From Amy at 1119, feeling anxious to go into a singles mixer with sex, intimacy, and romantic relationships. Any advice? Go. That's my advice, right? Yeah. Easy. Go. Again, the more we let OCD and anxiety make decisions for us and tell us how to live our life, the more it's going to continue to be there. And we're guaranteeing that it's going to impact our life in this negative way. I want you making decisions for your life. Deal with OCD as it shows up. So go to those events, go to those things, and start figuring out what you want to do and who you want to be outside of anxiety and OCD. Next question from Marcy at 1121. Patrick, I'll throw it to you. Yep. How do you treat OCD with technology addiction? I use it for reassurance. I've watched my son's life be swallowed up by his smartphone and computer use.
Some of the things I've done with families is just to set up, here's a rewards and consequences, right? We don't punish someone for having OCD, but we will give people rewards. So you can set up a set amount of screen time. And if you don't give in to OCD things, you can earn more time on screens. But if you do give in to OCD with compulsions, you can get less time on screens. Now, we sometimes use the words addiction a lot too, right? Where it may not necessarily be an addiction. Otherwise, I think most teenagers would be considered addicted at this point to their phones and their technologies. And if it's being used as reassurance or maybe even a distraction, then we want to extricate that from the experience because, of course, we know this. We want people with OCD to feel the feelings and learn that they can handle those things without needing something else to kind of get them through it or distract them through it. So, Marcy, I think this is one of those cases where you really reach out to a therapist who can help you set up a good behavioral program for your family.
100%. Next question, and I'll take it quickly because this is such a passion of mine, is from Laura at 1121. How do you determine between OCD and another anxiety disorder on overdrive, specifically in terms of rumination? So I want to pause for a second and just talk about this. And what I want to encourage is I would love for us to have on one of our clinicians here, Ryan Judd, really has taken a special interest in how to differentiate and treat GAD and OCD, how to explain it to patients and understand it. GAD and OCD should not be treated the same. And I want to be very clear about that I think a lot of times patients with GAD who actually aren't getting better and they're identifying it as OCD and doing ERP and wondering why they're getting stuck, it's because we're treating it more with ERP versus CBT and more of behavioral activation and thought challenging and things that need to be done for generalized anxiety disorder. It's also very important for patients to understand when they're ruminating due to GAD versus this is an actual ritual that we're trying to solve and feel better. And so there is a huge gap, I think, of learning between a lot of clinicians who treat OCD will say things like, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to treat it the same anyways. That's not true. We actually are going to treat it differently. And it is really important that we're able to differentiate and understand what is GAD, what is OCD. OCD thoughts tend to be more bizarre in nature. There tends to be more specific fears. It's less of this general, I'm anxious and everyday worries like we see in GAD, but the treatment also needs to be specialized for GAD versus OCD. And we want you to be able to differentiate when this is my GAD versus when this is my OCD. Same, by the way, with comorbid personality disorders, eating disorders, whatever it might be. We don't want everything labeled as one disorder if there's in fact multiple things going on, because there are specific interventions or specific tools we use for different disorders that need to be implemented depending on what you're dealing with. So next webinar, Chris, I would love to encourage us, which would be the first Monday of June, to do a webinar specifically on how to differentiate and how treatment looks different and how to understand if you're dealing with GAD or OCD or both, which many people are. Next question. Someone asked how they ask a question specifically for you, Patrick. So I'm going to hop into that one and then Chris will hop to you with the next one. So Betsy at 1129 said, how do I treat my severe OCD, depression, and anxiety?
Well, this dovetails nicely to what you were talking about just a moment ago. So for me, I look at ERP as my base work that I do, right? That's what I do. And so to me, there are ERP aspects that we can use for many different things. If you have an anxiety disorder, so like if there's an interoceptive exposure that we could do for panic, that's a form of ERP that we would do in panic. If it's a social anxiety, what kind of mistake practice and ERP work can we do for there? If it is a worry in GAD, like you were saying, Liz, there are still good exposure works that people can also do to be able to sit with worry and deal with those things. So I always want to take a look at that. And then if there is a depression going on, well, I also like to figure out the order that we're going to do this then. So is the depression so significant that someone isn't even getting off the couch or living their life at all because they're just so depressed? We got to work on that first before we're even going to get into the other things. But very often people will say, yeah, but I got to do all of it. I have to do it right now. I have to do everything. And if you don't even have the energy to get off the couch, there's no way we're going to have the energy to deal with everything all at once. So helping people to get some motivational interviewing in, to get them to prioritize where we're going to go, what we're going to start with, creating those I have a hierarchy sometimes of conditions first that we create, and then we'll do whatever hierarchies we need in there. So we'll get the behavioral activation going for the depression, and then we'll see what's the next thing that we do. So we're going to create an order and a plan together and figure that out.
Yeah. And understand what is what, and when's it showing up, and what should you do for each, that's
100%. Yes.
Absolutely. Next question, Chris at 1133. If any of those co-occurring conditions would interfere with ERP, should those be treated first? That was my guess, and a great question.
Yeah, somebody had asked earlier about that. So if people are experiencing co-occurring conditions, that's why an assessment is so important. And oftentimes what I like to do is what is impacting somebody the most. So if I have a client sitting across from me that can barely function because they are so depressed, it took everything just to get to our session. They're honest with me. They're like, I'm probably not going to do any of this work in between sessions because I go home, I sleep most of the day. I'm kind of in bed. I'm just really feeling depression. That needs to be treated first, because how is somebody going to get up and do anything that is being asked of them in ERP if they're not? So I often see, is there something that is going to prevent us from doing OCD treatment? You've talked about this on the lives, Liz, right? If somebody has absolutely trouble with managing any kind of emotions, and they are, screaming at home and breaking things and try to do an exposure, but they're so activated that they can't even function, we might not jump into OCD. We might want to treat that first. So what I would say is that if OCD is causing most of your distress and there's nothing that's going to interfere with that, then we would start with the OCD. And oftentimes anxiety and depression that is started from the OCD can often be mitigated and decreased just from getting better from the ERP. But if someone has a co-occurring condition that's the loudest and kind of getting in the way of OCD, maybe it could be trauma or depression, like I stated, then we'd want to get that addressed first. And if somebody's an expert in both, then they could do that, or you could work with a team. Sometimes they can be co-occurring treatments if they're not getting in the way of each other. I have clients that have PTSD that are getting treatment and then seeing me for the OCD, and it works nicely.
Definitely. And again, remember, there's tons of webinars IOCDF has done on co-occurring conditions, and you guys can go to IOCDF.org and put ideas for future webinars you want and experts you want us to bring on if there's specific questions y'all have. So we'd love to cover that. I'm seeing a lot of comments about values-based ERP and how important it was for individuals to really engage in this type of ERP for it to be a game changer. And so I love hearing and seeing that. And there's definitely webinars we've done specific to values-based ERP. Next question, Dr. McGrath, is coverage through traditional Medicare in Ohio close to being approved?
Oh, for no CD, we are actively working on Medicare, Medicaid right now in one state. Once we get all the kinks kind of worked out with everything there, then we will work on opening up more across the nation. So we're getting there, but as you two know, working with the government is a long process.
So much fun. Insurance is so much fun. Yeah, let's do a whole webinar on that. Let's have a panel.
Oh, God. Liz, how long have you and I have been talking about that? My gosh. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. And we have great luck now with single case agreements, and patients are using their insurance here more than ever before. But wow, it is such a learning curve and so difficult. But I think that would be a great webinar for us to also do, is like how to use your insurance, like what you can do, what you can't do, and what facilities can do to help, and what all this language means of SCAs, INEs, in-network, out-of-network, all the things. So we'll also pin that. I'm seeing a ton of you guys ask questions about if someone's not ready for ERP, if somebody's reluctant to doing ERP, should they try ICBT first? What should they do? I'm seeing this multiple times. Think about so if someone's not ready to do a intervention for their OCD, we want to engage in readiness for that intervention. So Dr. Pollard just produced a wonderful book around this where it's really focused on readiness and family skills. And then Alec does a ton of readiness for OCD work that I highly recommend you checking out. But there's entire kind of protocols and interventions around readiness for treatment. I think SPACE is a great example of that for kids and adolescents, where we're kind of teaching the family system to be ready and to start doing some of the work that pushes individuals to need to do treatment or to do that work. And we can do the same for adults. So I really would focus on readiness. What I will also say is that if you are a good OCD clinician or you're seeing a good OCD clinician, they should know how to get you ready for ERP, get you motivated, get you willing. It shouldn't be session one. If someone's resistant, we're just forcing them into exposures. Exposures don't work if they're not agreed upon, if you don't see the value and purpose in it. And that's also kind of that point of values-based ERP and the work we've done around that. We will take a lot of these questions and move them over to our list of all the questions Chris and I need to answer, and we will get to them both next time or maybe in between. We'll go ahead and do a pre-recorded. There's a couple questions. Emetophobia, definitely check out the work, webinars, and treatment for emetophobia, because there's obviously some specific ERP and exposure interventions for emetophobia versus CBT alone. So we definitely do want that exposure element, and we want to think through how that can work. So if you're seeing no change with traditional CBT, we want to go into some more specific interventions and protocols if the current clinician doesn't know how to do those. Thank y'all so much. Chris, Dr. McGrath, it's always good to have you. So excited to see you guys in Chicago, and I hope so many of the viewers will be joining us there as well in July.
Thank you all.
Yes. Come out to the IOCDF conference, iocdf.org/OCDCon. We'll see you there. Thanks, Patrick. Good seeing you.
Thank you, everybody. See you guys.